Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. As we wrap up our Season 11 coverage, in today's video I wanted to review the Ice Chapter and explain my final thoughts on the season. We'll be talking a lot about the various aspects of the season, such as the characters, the plot, and stuff like that. And I first want to say that the Ice Chapter is definitely better than the Fire Chapter. Let me just clarify that right off the bat. I feel like with the Fire Chapter, it started weakly, had a strong middle, and ended weakly. And for the Ice Chapter, I think that's the opposite. It starts pretty strongly, it has a very weak middle, and then it ends on a stronger note. Not the best ending, but it definitely does end stronger. And let's talk about the beginning of the season first, and why I do think it was executed pretty well. The best episodes of the beginning were definitely 16 and 18, and especially 16, one of my favorite episodes of the season, and I think that's because the 11-minute format works pretty well for it. In this episode, we get introduced to the Netherrealm and also our main characters for the season, and we get a brief shot at what Akita might be like, and we also get to see the villains, and this was my favorite scene of the season for a while. Again, what I really like about this episode is it wastes no time to get us acquainted with this new realm and our new cast of characters, and it also portrays the villains as very mysterious, especially the Ice Emperor, and this was an awesome look at what our villains are going to be like for the season. And as for the actual Netherrealm itself, I definitely think it's one of the better realms in Ninjago, and it's really cool. I love how we get a more mysterious side of it with the Ice Samurai and stuff, but also characters that are friendly to the ninja, and we get introduced to a lot of characters. I mean, we have the former king of the Netherrealm and his army, which had been turned into the Ice Samurai, and then also the people of Great Lake, who are basically normal humans, and of course the Formlings too. So I thought it was very cool in the sense that we got introduced to a lot of new characters in this season. And overall, the Netherrealm had a lot of cool concepts, and it really helped to add this kind of magical feel to the realm, especially with the Formlings, and I thought that was a pretty cool idea that was executed very well. Then you also have the fire, which essentially serves as this source of hope to the people of the Great Lake, and I thought that was a nice concept too. Although this season is definitely inspired by Tournament of Elements and Hunted, you know, with the new realm and stuff, and also Zane getting captured and the ninja having to save him, this season also is unique in its own way, and this chapter rather, not this season, but I like that it takes its own path, and it ends up being pretty different from those two seasons. So now that we've talked about the Netherrealm itself, let's talk about some of the people of the Netherrealm and the side characters that we're introduced to. So let's talk about the people of Great Lake first. I don't like Sorrel. I just feel like she's way too similar to Mistake, and essentially exists only to provide plot convenience and to push Nia's arc along. I feel like Sorrel should have been executed a lot better, and also maybe not make her so similar to Mistake. I mean, her face is essentially the same as Mistake, and of course there's the gray hair too. I just feel like she was way too similar to Mistake, and should have been a bit more different. The Great Lake also comes with a comic relief duo called Uthag and Boma, and these guys are actually pretty funny. I like their sense of humor, and I thought overall they were done well. Sometimes it's a bit annoying, but I feel like for the most part, they were enjoyable characters. Now, we also have Grimfax, who is the Ice Samurai, one of the Ice Samurai commanders, who defects and will later turn to the ninja side. And I feel like Grimfax is okay. He's not the best, he's a bit boring at times, but I feel like generally he's a okay character, and I like that twist of him turning to the ninja side. And actually, he is supposed to be the former king of the Netherrealm, which I think is pretty cool as well. And of course, there's Crag too. Crag is the seemingly evil Yeti, introduced in 2122, who befriends the ninja and becomes Cole's ally. And I feel like Crag is well done. Aside the odd-looking design and pretty bad voice acting, I feel like the idea of Crag is nice, and also complements this idea of turning an enemy into a friend very nicely. However, I don't feel like he should have been in the season at all, or this chapter rather, because he just takes away from other plot elements, and spending 2 episodes on him wasn't a good idea. Let's talk about some of the more important side characters now, like Akita and Katara. And Akita is generally a good character. At first I was very concerned about her just being a side plot, and she kind of is in the end, but I feel like they did a good job of working her into the main plot, especially in the final 2 episodes. Coming out of the Fire chapter, it wasn't a good signal that Akita would be a revenge character, and thankfully in the final product she isn't, and revenge is really just a side thing. I like that they do more with her character rather than just what they did with Asphira and the whole revenge thing. Then there's also her relationship with Lloyd that people have went absolutely crazy over, and I'm not really a shipper, so I don't care too much about that. But what I do like is that this story is kind of a follow-up to Lorumi, and where Lloyd retains his development from Season 8, but he also learns to open up a bit more. Many have compared Akita to Faith, and they play very similar roles in their seasons, and I would say Faith is a better character. She just has a stronger motivation, but I do feel like Akita is generally a good character, and it would be awesome if we get to see her again. And for her brother Kataru, I mean, he's fine. Maybe he shouldn't have been in the season at all. I don't really feel like the prisoner subplot added anything to the season, other than convincing some people who refuse to believe the Ice Emperor theory that Zane might actually be the real prisoner. Like Grimfax, I think his character is okay, but other than that, nothing really stands out about him, and I feel like they could have done more to make him a bit more of a unique character. One of the biggest flaws with episode 29, and it's a really good episode, but it totally gives Kataru and Grimfax a side character treatment, and I didn't like that. Generally, this chapter does a much better job with the side characters than the Fire chapter does, and most of them are enjoyable enjoyable characters. I think the problem is lack of focus for some of the characters, like Sorla, Grimfax, and Katara needed more that made them stand out. And as for Akita, I feel like she was generally a well done character. Now that we've talked all about the side characters, let's talk about the ninja themselves and the various roles that they play in the season. We'll start with Lloyd because he definitely plays the biggest role. They play pretty safe with Lloyd in the season and they don't do anything that drastic, but I think that's fine, and Lloyd is generally enjoyable in this season. But I think the big issue is that he is focused on way too much, and this is at the expense of the other ninja. I mean, did we really need yet another Lloyd story? I don't think anyone really asked for this, and yet here we are again. This really wasn't necessary because, I don't know, it's not like 2018 was a year all about Lloyd. The only trilogy is essentially Lloyd's story, and here we are again. I think the trust issue story and the continuation of that from season 8 is fine, but it really wasn't needed in this season at all and should have been continued in a later season. And again, Lloyd is fine, I don't think he's bad or anything. Sure, his trust issue story in episode 23, I think it was, this is really dumbed down and this was just painful to watch, but it gets better after that. I think the big issue is that they're not taking enough risks with the characters. I understand that Lloyd is easy to write, but they have to take risks and try out other characters, and I really hope that Lloyd isn't getting focused on again in season 12. Nia's story in this season is about learning to control ice, and I feel like this is a really good idea, but ultimately she gets pretty much nothing from this arc, and that's because this story is barely focused on at all. No offense or anything, but this story was kind of lazily done, and especially with Sorla's involvement. Sorla just plays way too big a role in Nia's arc, and again, I really don't like Sorla, and that's especially because of her involvement in Nia's story. The other issue is that this is way too similar to season 5, and I ultimately don't feel like she got anything out of this arc. This is basically the same thing where Nia has to go with the flow and accept change and take advantage of it, and I don't feel like this is unique at all. And unlike last time, Nia really doesn't struggle, and there is no conflict. Nia's only struggle, I guess, is her mental barrier of not wanting to go with the flow, but this is really stupid because she already learned that going with the flow is the way to go. Ha, that's a nice rhyme. She already learned all of that back in season 5, so what's even the point of any of this? Maybe her conflict would actually be meaningful if it was focused on more, but it wasn't, and ultimately I feel like this arc is basically just for Nia to gain a new power that she will likely never use again, so in the end it was pretty pointless. And as for Kai, man, Kai is terrible in this season, and for a variety of reasons. First of all, his arc isn't an arc at all. As I explained in my episode 30 review, it's just a bunch of random stuff that they put together, and it doesn't really connect that well. Both of the chapters have proven that Kai's lost any ounce of maturity that he had before, and at the end, we got a Kai who is whiny, childish, and this is not the Kai that I remember growing up with. Kai was an excellent character, and it's just really sad that they've ruined him. And Cole plays a fairly good role in this season. Again, the main issue with all these arcs is how childish they are and how dumbed down they've been, but I feel like with Cole, he reminds me a lot of how he was in seasons 10 and 8, which is a good thing, and I feel like they definitely kept him out of all the ninja the most in character as he was in Masters of Spinjitzu. And Jay is Jay. I mean, he's fine, he's funny enough, but generally he's been getting less funny over the last few years, and he plays the smallest role out of all the ninja, so here's to some hope that he may play a bigger role in 2020. Zane's story though, and especially Zane is the main villain of the season. Zane is the Ice Emperor, and I think this was one of Ninjago's best ideas yet. Zane's arc is definitely really done well in the season, and I love the foreshadowing with his vision, and how later every single aspect of that vision ends up coming true. Seriously though, Zane and Vex are god tier compared to Asphira. These guys are good villains, and they're not the best, but I feel like they are pretty strong villains, and I feel like if 2020 continues this, then it'll definitely be a lot stronger than the Fire chapter. Vex is such a hateable character, if that even is a word, and I think that's what people definitely love. He also has really good voice acting and a pretty interesting backstory, but it's a shame because Vex doesn't get a good fate at the end of the season. In fact, I'd say his fate is pretty lame. Just banishing him isn't really that good, and this is a pretty lame ending for Vex, and he was a pretty good villain. I feel like he's definitely strong in episodes 27 and 28, but towards the end of the season he's definitely a lot weaker as he plays more of a side role, and I think that's fine if you give Zane more emphasis, but I feel like more could have been done with Vex to give him a better ending. Zane as the Ice Emperor though is really good, and I love how they have a new voice actor for him, and the voice acting is awesome for Zane, as well as the design. The design is really cool, and I like how they actually managed to turn one of the most good guy characters of the series into a really compelling villain. He has a decent backstory, not as good as I would have hoped it would be, but it's okay, and I also feel like his redemption is generally pretty good. The scene of him regaining his memories is the best of the season with excellent soundtrack, but it is really rushed, and this is definitely the result of what the season chooses to focus on and what it doesn't focus on, which I would say is the biggest problem with the chapter. You see, this chapter introduces this idea of new animation styles in episode 19, 24, and 26, and this can be really good if done right and if it sticks to the story, like at 24, but it could also be really disastrous and harm the season, like in 26 and 19. And I'm glad that they're trying out new styles. Visually, I think it looks great, especially the anime style, which is very fun to watch, those are nice fights, but episode 26 is my least favorite of the series. And that's because it's very dramatic, very cheesy, and for no good reason at all. This episode can be skipped and it won't add anything to the series at all. And I feel like these episodes shouldn't be in the season. They're taking away from the finale, and instead we get a very rushed Zane redemption, and also a finale in which Zane feels no guilt at all for his actions. He just is happy to go home, and I feel like this is a result of choosing to include these fillers. Because we have these fillers, it's taking away from the main plot, and the main plot of the season was awesome, and we need to see a lot more of the Ice Emperor and Vex, and then I feel like this chapter would have been a lot better. Also, there was a problem with the Traveler's Tea in this season, and that's because Traveler's Tea just is way too dramatic in this season. First of all, we have Cole losing the Traveler's Tea in the first episode, and that tea really shouldn't have been the chapter at all because the tea wouldn't have worked. Then we have the Traveler's Tree, and that's fine and all. It's very plot convenient, and that kind of sucks, but you know, it's okay. Then there's a stupid scene in 30 where it's revealed that the Traveler's Tree, the tea from that tree, isn't actually going to work at all. Instead, Cole uses some other fruit to get home, and I feel like there was a lot about Traveler's Tea in this season that was kind of stupid. Traveler's Tea has always been a tool of plot convenience, and there's no questioning that, but it's definitely overused in this season and could have been used a lot less. Another issue I have with the Ice chapter and the season in general is that it's very repetitive. For a season that is supposed to be creative and new and refreshing, it is basically just copying a lot of these storylines from older seasons, and the Ice chapter repeats a lot of stuff. We have a lot of monster fights, which I'm honestly done with monster fights at the end of the season, and then we also have the powerless arcs in this season, which are pretty bad and again just copying off of older seasons, and I feel like we can take a break from this and try out some new stuff. For again, a season that is about creativity, this is not really a creative season. The Ice chapter played it very safe, and a bit too safe in my opinion, in terms of characters and plot. And I would have liked to have seen this season take a lot more risks. Let's face it, we all knew that Zane was the Ice Emperor, and we all knew that he would return home as a good guy, and this season was too predictable. In terms of tone, it's actually pretty good, and the Fire chapter suffers from a really childish tone, and not enough of a transition from Master of Spinjitzu to this. But the Ice chapter is a good tone, and it's kind of in the middle, and I wish that in the future the tone will be like this, because I think it's handled pretty well. In the end, the Ice chapter is definitely better than the Fire chapter for the reasons I've mentioned, but it's not that much better, and I still feel like it is a really weak installment. One good comparison I've heard on Discord is it's like comparing garbage to garbage with the cherry on top, and I feel like this is a bit extreme, but I think you get the main point. The Ice chapter isn't drastically better than the Fire chapter and still suffers a lot of issues on its own. Even though I will say that it is better than the Fire chapter, it's not that good. It was too predictable and played it way too safe, and the filler definitely impacted the season in a negative way. I'm gonna give the Ice chapter a 5.5 out of 10, better than the Fire chapter and had a lot of potential, but I do feel like both of these chapters were relatively weak installments, and that season 11 is my least favorite season of the show yet. There was so much potential for the season, and I think it's really disappointing that a lot of it was wasted. And so in the end, it is my least favorite season. But anyways, that's going to be all for this video. Next project, if you guys enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, share it with anyone ever you know, and let me know what you guys thought of Season 11's Ice Chapter, and I will see you next time.